El efectito puedo temblar.
There will be massive global implications of this US attack on Venezuela. Uh, Now, this depends on how successful it is. That is, Maduro has been arrested and taken out, but it's possible that his regime, the vice president and the defense minister, might survive. But even if they do survive, it won't be for long, because the main leader is gone, and there is a legitimate opposition which has won the elections in 2024, and the current regime, Maduro's, was quite unpopular because of the massive economic crisis, which had uh, destroyed 3/4 of per capita income. Venezuela had gone from a $15,000 per capita income country to a $4,000 per capita income country within 15 years. So, unlikely that this regime will survive too long. I have explained in my previous video why the US attacked Venezuela. Why did Trump do it? But now the implications are massive for the world. Why? Because next target, if this is successful, would be Cuba and then Iran. Why Cuba? Because again, like Venezuela, it's a very weak country right now, very poor economic situation. In fact, it was dependent on Venezuela for both oil and for financial support. And Cuba has had a problem with the United States, or rather, the United States has had a problem with Cuba for the last 65 odd years. And because of that, uh, it would be a great victory for Trump if he were able to eliminate the government there and do regime change. Moreover, a large part of the diaspora, the Cuban diaspora, is settled in the United States, and they all vote Republican. Mostly they vote Republican. So, and to top it all, the foreign minister of the United States, as the Secretary of State, is himself an ethnic Cuban. Marco Rubio has had a long time ideological agenda to remove the Cuban regime. And he's a hardliner, and he's pushing every government, including the one in which he's serving, that is Trump's. So, and it would make electoral sense for Trump, for Maduro, for Marco Rubio. So all of these factors would mean that Cuba would be next on their target. And it would be actually quite easy, in my opinion. A little bit of push, strangulation, maybe some military buildup like they did with Venezuela around it, putting psychological pressure, could result in Cuba toppling over. But Trump's ultimate prize would be Iran. Because as I mentioned in my previous video, Trump lives in the 1970s and 80s world. And in that world, the US suffered two humiliations. One was in Vietnam, the other was in Tehran, in Iran. The hostage crisis in 79, 80. And I'm sure Trump hasn't forgotten it. And it's part of the reason that he's a bit hostile to Iran. Also, it would satisfy the pro-Israel lobby in the US. This APEC lobby wants regime change in Iran. Netanyahu was visiting the US recently for the same purpose. He had earlier also tried to coax the US, and when he became successful in his attack, the US joined in with a few bombs on nuclear sites, but did not go for regime change in those attacks last year, 6 months ago, in 2025. But this time, the US might be more emboldened, Trump specifically. That is, his longtime dream of having regime change in Iran looks quite near. The Iranian regime, again, is tottering. Again, it's doing economically quite poorly because of economic mismanagement. Just like Venezuela and Cuba had badly economically mismanaged. And on top of that, US sanctions and US embargoes had further strangulated their governments. Same thing has happened with Iran. The US has not allowed Iran to export oil freely, has canceled the JCPOA agreement. That was Trump himself doing it in his first term. All of this has further weakened Iran. And the public in Iran keeps rising every 2-3 years in protest. Again, there are people on the streets. So that's why Trump's tweet the other day, I think it was yesterday or day before, saying that he would keep Iran in his crosshairs. That is, he's locked and loaded in case Iran kills the protesters. he will immediately attack them. I think it's a bit of an exaggeration, and he's playing a psychological game. But nonetheless, this would give some heart to the protesters, may give some fears to the government, and so Iran could be next. Now, all of this depends on whether everything goes smoothly in Venezuela and Cuba. That is, so far it's gone smoothly. US has lost no troops, not even injured anybody. And this is important to Trump's because it's important to his base. The Republican base, which was tired of interventions and endless wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, where both money and treasure and blood was spilled. They wanted an end to that, an end to those kind of expensive interventionist wars. But they don't mind if it's an easy victory. And so Trump cannot launch a full-scale land invasion, but if he can get them a great victory on the cheap, the base will be happy. Trump will be happy. It will increase his political mileage within the United States, and his funders, whether they are the oil industry, in the case of Venezuela and Iran, or it's the Israel lobby, APEC, etc. They would all be happy, Netanyahu. So these two countries could be on the line. But the bigger implications are for global order. You see, the global order has been in flux. In fact, I would say there's been little in global order since the Russian invasion of Ukraine. In the last 4 years, we have seen repeatedly Israel has broken every limit on it. It has committed a genocide in Gaza. It has completely destroyed southern Lebanon and Syria. And it reminds us of Thucydides, when he said that the strong do as they will and the weak suffer as they must. Now, the implications for India and the implications for China are quite interesting too. China, I think, is unlikely to invade Taiwan. Why? Because yes, the Taiwanese are vulnerable, and the Japanese and the American bases and all of that we have heard. But so is China. The east coast of China is where all its industry is, all its major population centers. That is, if you go from Shenzhen and Guangzhou, which are near Hong Kong, and travel up through Shanghai to Beijing, that's where the major population and industrial centers are. And in any conflict, they're going to get hit. Will China be able to take that hit and go back 50 years? I doubt it. I doubt Xi Jinping will risk all of that. And at the end, he may even only get a husk of an island in Taiwan, because Taiwan itself may become a smoking hulk. So unlikely that China will follow. But China could do one thing. It could go for Arunachal, because Arunachal is a claim that China has had for a while. It's weak to defend because it's very far from mainland India in the northeast. And it has China has no large population centers or industrial centers near it. So, but the one thing preventing that is the roughly $100 billion trade surplus that China enjoys with India. That is, the Chinese are earning a lot of money by exporting to India, and it would be unlikely to threaten that and jeopardize that, and hence it may not make an attempt on Arunachal, unless, of course, things get out of hand on other fronts and there are some internal political issues in China which could lead to an attack, something which happened in 1962. So, so unlikely, because as I said, of the trade income that it gets from India, and India also is highly dependent for its intermediate and input goods from China. But there is another danger, and I hope it doesn't turn out, that is, India does not become too adventurous seeing what's happening in the international arena. That is, India has disputes with Nepal on border issues, certainly with Pakistan, and in Bangladesh now seems to be the new target. And I hope it doesn't lead to adventurism here, because if you see the United States, it rarely does this kind of adventurism on its own borders, because it knows that there will be blowback and their own border areas will be affected and populations will be affected. That is, US never takes a fight to Canada or Mexico, a physical fight. At least it's been over 150 years since they've done that. So unlikely that they will do that. And that is wise strategy. Keep wars away from your borders, grow fast, increase your power slowly, as Deng Xiaoping said, rise quietly. And when you're powerful, then everybody else will listen to you, because you will be carrying a big stick, in Teddy Roosevelt's words. Thank you.